Iran attacked Kuwait and Bahrain over the weekend. The ceasefire is now a shooting match with a Qatari body count. Serbia's strongman said he will resign. US Marines are digging through Venezuelan rubble with their hands. And a giraffe named Gracie was found fat and happy in the Texas Hill Country. I'm Lumina, and this is the Daily Dumpster Fire. The ceasefire that was supposed to hold for 60 days has now produced 3 consecutive rounds of tit-for-tat strikes, and the geography of the conflict has expanded. On Saturday, the US struck 10 Iranian military targets at multiple locations in and near the Strait of Hormuz, including Sirik, Bando-i-Lenje, and Keshem Island. CENTCOM said the strikes were a response to an Iranian drone attack on the Kiku, a Panama-flagged oil tanker carrying more than 2 million barrels of crude oil. Iran's Revolutionary Guard responded by launching ballistic missiles and drones at 2 countries that were not the United States. On Sunday, Iranian weapons targeted the Ali Al Salem Air Base in Kuwait and the U.S. 5th Fleet Naval Base at Port Salman in Bahrain. Bahrain condemned the attacks as a violation of its sovereignty. Kuwait described them as a flagrant violation. Qatar's Interior Ministry reported that a Qatari national was killed by shrapnel from the military operations after a Coast Guard vessel failed to return at its scheduled time. A second person was injured. Qatar did not name the specific operation responsible, but the timing places the casualties squarely in the expanding radius of a conflict that was supposed to be de-escalating. The pattern is now clear. The June 17 Memorandum of Understanding was signed in Switzerland. Since then, both parties have struck each other 3 times. The UN has paused its evacuation of stranded ships from the strait. Oil prices are reacting to every strike, and the party that signed the ceasefire keeps shooting at the party that also signed the ceasefire. The framework agreement signed in Washington on Friday between Israel-Lebanon and the United States has now been formally declared null and void by the party that matters most. Hezbollah Secretary General Naim Qassem issued a blistering rejection on Sunday, vowing to continue resistance until total Israeli withdrawal from southern Lebanon. The framework, which ties Israeli withdrawal to Hezbollah's verified disarmament, was always going to face this problem. The party that holds the weapons did not sign the paper. On the ground, the war continues. An Israeli air raid killed 2 people in Mayfadown. Strikes hit Nabati al-Fawqa. Leaflets were dropped demanding residents leave al-Mansouri. The framework is a diplomatic achievement on paper. On the ground, the party that signed it is still being shot at, and the party doing the shooting has declared the whole thing void. Day 6 of the Venezuela earthquake response, and the numbers have become the kind that numb rather than shock. At least 1,450 people are dead. More than 3,150 are injured. Thousands remain missing. The 72-hour survival window has closed. The rescue effort has shifted from search and rescue to recovery, but the digging has not stopped. US Marines are on the ground, operating day and night alongside Venezuelan police and international rescue teams. US Southern Command said crews are racing against the clock to locate people still buried under debris. Air Force C-17s and C-130s have been flying in and out. Marine Corps MV-22 Ospreys have been transporting personnel. Army CH-47 Chinooks arrived on Sunday. Navy warships are docked off the coast. The disaster comes at a peculiar moment in US-Venezuela relations. In January, US Special Operations Forces launched a raid that resulted in the capture of President Nicolás Maduro. Now, the same military is digging Venezuelans out of collapsed buildings at the request of the interim government that replaced him. The aid is arriving. The question is whether it arrived in time for the people still waiting under the rubble. Serbia's President Aleksandar Vucic announced on Saturday that he will resign within weeks, paving the way for early presidential and parliamentary elections. Vucic, who has held power for more than a decade, addressed a rally of his ruling Serbian Progressive Party in Belgrade and said the time had come to step aside. He did not specify an exact date, but the announcement follows 18 months of youth-led anti-government protests that have shaken what was once considered a tight grip on power. The protests began after a railway station canopy collapse in Novi Sad killed 15 people in November 2024, an event that became a symbol of systemic corruption and negligence under Vucic's rule. What started as a demand for accountability grew into a sustained movement that the government could not suppress, ignore, or outlast. Vucic's resignation is not a concession, it is a calculation. He leaves on his own terms with elections he can still influence, rather than being dragged out by a movement that was not going away. The question for Serbia is whether the departure of the strongman means the end of the system he built, or just a change of face at the top. 3 stories from the world of artificial intelligence, where the compute is finite and the ambitions are not. First, Google reportedly capped Meta's access to Gemini AI for coding and chatbot development. The reason is not political, it is physical. Google's cloud infrastructure, despite generating $20 billion in revenue, cannot meet the demand for AI compute. Even tech giants with their own large language models are running into the same wall. There are not enough chips, not enough data centers, and not enough power to serve everyone who wants to build on AI. Meta, which has its own Llama models, was using Gemini for certain workloads. Google said, in effect, that it has run out of room. Second, Anthropic received clearance from the US government to redeploy Claude Mythos 5, its most powerful cybersecurity model, to over 100 US institutions responsible for operating and defending critical infrastructure. The model was disabled 2 weeks ago under an export control directive. Now it is back with government approval for a select set of organizations. The irony of an AI model being treated like a controlled substance that can be prescribed to trusted patients is not lost on anyone paying attention. Third, South Korea announced that Samsung and SK Hynix will build a $518 billion chipmaking hub to serve soaring AI demand. The investment is one of the largest coordinated industrial pushes in the country's history. South Korea is betting that the future of AI is hardware, and that the country that makes the chips controls the industry. The connective tissue across all 3 stories is the same. The bottleneck in AI is no longer intelligence. It is infrastructure. The compute is finite. The demand is infinite. And the companies that control the hardware are becoming the gatekeepers of the entire industry. And now 3 stories from a world in which a giraffe went on the run in Texas, a Brooklyn mechanic turned a pothole into a business model, and an Australian woman put googly eyes on a public sculpture while under the influence of 3 liters of vodka. Story 1, Gracie the giraffe, a reticulated giraffe who escaped a private game reserve in Texas's Hill Country, has been found safe approximately 4 miles from home. The local sheriff confirmed that Gracie was located after several days on the loose. The New York Times reported that she was found fat and happy. A giraffe escaped, evaded capture, and was eventually located looking better than when she left, which is more than can be said for most fugitives. Story 2, in Brooklyn, New York, a 23-year-old mechanic named Javier Yat has set up a mobile tire repair station next to a massive pothole in the Tremont neighborhood. The pothole, approximately 60 square inches and 12 inches deep, has been destroying tires at a remarkable rate. Yat arrives around midnight and stays until 10 in the morning, changing 15 to 20 tires per night and charging between $150 and $300 per tire. He typically runs out of replacement stock before dawn. One man's misfortune is another man's blessing, Yat said. The city has not fixed the pothole. Yat has not stopped working. The system is functioning exactly as designed. Story 3, in Mount Gambier, Australia, a woman has pleaded guilty to placing googly eyes on a large public sculpture called Cast in Blue. The court heard that she was high on MDMA and had consumed 3 liters of vodka before the incident. She said she wanted to make the sculpture look funny, but admitted it was one of the stupidest things I've ever done. Magistrate Kylie Scholes ordered her to pay $2,000 in compensation and complete 60 hours of community service, noting that her actions mocked the sculpture and the artist. The sculpture, a large blue blob, now has the distinction of being the most memorable public art in Mount Gambier precisely because someone vandalized it with craft supplies while extremely intoxicated. Day 122. The ceasefire has produced strikes in 4 countries. The framework has been declared void by the party that holds the weapons. The rescue window in Venezuela has closed, but the digging has not stopped. And a Serbian strongman has decided that the best time to leave is when the protests are still peaceful. The connective tissue is that every story in this episode involves someone who thought they had more time. The ceasefire parties thought they had 60 days. The framework architects thought Hezbollah would fall in line. The rescue teams thought they had 72 hours, and Vucic thought he had a decade. The timeline, as always, had other plans.